Lamu County, Kenya. The border with Somalia is close enough here that the Boni Forest doesn't care which side of the line it grows on. For months, Kenyan military intelligence had been tracking something moving through that forest. Al-Shabaab fighters slipping back across the border, regrouping under trees so thick the sun barely touches the ground. Nobody knew exactly when they'd strike. They only knew it was coming. It came at 5:45 in the morning. A KDF outpost near Baure village was still waking up when more than 100 armed men hit the perimeter at once. Not a probing attack, not a handful of gunmen testing the wire. A full assault, AK-47s, rocket-propelled grenades, coordinated movement, fighters dressed in stolen military fatigues to buy themselves seconds of confusion in the low light. The plan was simple and brutal: overrun the camp before the soldiers inside even had their boots laced. For a few seconds, it almost worked. Explosions tore into the earthworks. Muzzle flashes lit the tree line like a storm that wouldn't move on. Soldiers scrambled out of their tents into a firefight that was already at full volume before most of them understood what was happening. There was no gentle build-up here, no warning shots, no negotiation. Just a wall of fire from the forest and a camp full of young Kenyan soldiers who had exactly one choice: fight right now or be overrun. They fought. What the attackers didn't count on was how fast the KDF response would organize itself out of that chaos. Within moments, soldiers were in position along the perimeter, returning fire in disciplined bursts, holding the line instead of scattering. A machine gun team anchored the defense and forced the attackers to slow their advance. The battle that followed lasted for hours, close, brutal, and fought almost entirely in the dark and the smoke of burning supply tents. Among the attackers was a man Kenyan officials would later identify as Thomas Evans, a British citizen who had converted to Islam, taken the name Abdul Hakim, and traveled to East Africa years earlier to join Al-Shabaab. He had become fluent in Somali, trusted enough to issue commands over radio during the assault, believed to be the group's second in command in the region. He did not survive the battle. Also among the dead was Lukman Osman Isa, a senior Al-Shabaab commander from the Kenyan coast, tied to previous attacks on KDF convoys in the same area. By the time the sun was fully up, the attack had failed. 11 Al-Shabaab fighters lay dead around the perimeter they'd tried to breach. The camp had held. But it hadn't held for free. 2 Kenyan soldiers were killed defending that outpost, men whose names don't make international headlines, but who stood their ground when more than 100 fighters came out of the forest to take their base from them. The fight wasn't over when the shooting near the camp stopped. Surviving attackers scattered into the Boni Forest, and KDF soldiers pursued them through the day. 4 more militants were killed that evening as the pursuit continued. Elsewhere in Lamu County that same morning, a separate group of Al-Shabaab fighters had briefly seized the nearby village of Mangai, herding residents into the local mosque and preaching to them for 3 hours before melting back into the bush. A reminder that Baure wasn't an isolated incident, but one front in a wider campaign along Kenya's coast. The timing wasn't an accident either. The attack fell on the anniversary of the Mpeketoni massacre 1 year earlier, when Al-Shabaab fighters had killed close to 70 people in the same region. Baure was meant to be a message. Instead, it became a defense that held a base full of soldiers who didn't break when the forest opened fire on them before dawn. In the days that followed, both the United States and the United Kingdom publicly praised the Kenya Defense Forces for their response. Not because the story made for easy headlines, but because 11 armed men, backed by 100 more, tried to take a Kenyan military outpost by surprise in the dark and failed because the soldiers inside didn't run. That's the Battle of Baure. Not a legend, not a movie script. Just before 6 in the morning, on a border nobody was watching closely enough, a group of Kenyan soldiers held a line that mattered. If stories like this matter to you, stories about the real soldiers, the real battles, and the real cost behind the headlines, subscribe to this channel. There's more of this coming, straight from history.